Right. So to answer your question, let's take a step back. I think one of the speakers mentioned what the stock market was in 2009. And I remember doing a report for one of the brokering companies aimed at the diaspora. It was called Sri Lanka's Time in the Sun, or something like that. And so we do have to recognize that we have moved up a gear or two, moved up a few steps. We're playing on a higher plateau, which is good. Um, so uh, looking back, it's been a very positive journey in the last decade. Now, where are we now? So you have a lot of uncertainty, um, and that I think applies to both the local and the foreign investors. We don't know what's going to happen around the corner. Um, people are talking about devaluation of the currency. Uh, are we going to have to endure some of the IMF concessions if we go down that route? So there are many uncertainties, and again, as one of the learned speakers mentioned, um, I don't think the CSE has a fair crack in the media. It's usually bad news that surfaces. So good news. I think one of the urgent needs would be to engage with possibly a PR agency to get a positive vibe out there, so that more young people, I should say, would be engaging with the market. Because as far as I can see, being here now 18 years, more or less, and Sri Lanka has a very strong legal system. It has a good institutional environment, regulatory environment, frameworks are good. Policy has been uncertain at times, but I think in this sector there are no issues in terms of the policy environment, taxation, etc. It's very clear, so there's no reason why you should be tapping into more growth opportunities. And there's a big interconnectivity with that. Obviously, with one of the probably the best things that happened here last year was the slash in interest rates. My company, RIA, we deal probably 50% of our work in real estate. So we know that it was an amazing shot in the arm, pun intended, for that industry. And even with the pandemic, we noticed amazing growth, especially amongst the properties and the products that were targeting domestic, affordable asset classes. So here again, that's an opportunity. And there's a lot of intricate dynamics of, the short term. So I'm not speaking for everyone, obviously, but many of our clients, when they dispose of a real estate asset, they would tend to go in for a short-term equity investment while perhaps looking for a long-term real estate investment. So that I think in Sri Lanka, you have that tendency to think of the market, short to medium term real estate as more of a long term. As one of my very informed clients mentioned yesterday, that when he thinks about things like children's education, sometimes you might invest in a real estate because it's a very long term prospect. So coming to the future very quickly, I think herein lies the connectivity. You mentioned REITs. REITs might be the gap and the bridge between the short term and the long term, so that we have that. The environment is good. Having said that, I think you need to understand that REITs is really a developed world product, even at this stage. I think 60% of REITs are in the US. Asia Pacific accounts for I think, something like 21%, of which Australia, followed by Japan and Singapore, account for the rest. India and China don't seem to have any REITs, and I think Philippines is where Sri Lanka is at. So very quickly, I think that the future, the REITs coming on board would be great. Of course, the challenge will be to build confidence and trust, and especially where the diaspora is concerned, that's really important to ensure that perceived conflicts of interest, mismanagement, regulatory conflicts, transparency in information, all these things are really addressed very strongly. which again may come to a PR exercise. So I think there is a lot to look forward to there. Hope that's helpful.
Roshan, is there any element that we need to do in relation to REIT, which you have seen has been a positive impact? Any kind of a feature that Sri Lankan REIT is lacking? I think Kanishka did mention one in relation to right now, once the building is completed only, you can put to a REIT, while in other countries, they do allow for you to fund that investment. Any other features or anything else that can be, is there a requirement for anything to be done to make it more attractive in Sri Lanka? Let me ask that from Roshan and then move towards Kanishka.
Right. Thank you, Rifka. So my understanding is it's very much a moving target right now. So as we know, it's like 1 year since the government announced the REITs to be permitted in Sri Lanka, but only a certain type of REITs, and these REITs have to be listed on the stock exchange. I think there are conditions like the building has to be occupied, it has to be completed. So the way that we are entering REITs has a limitation, but an opportunity to also build some trust and obviously avoid the pitfalls. I believe the government or the cabinet was asked to consider, I think it was 12 revisions to the initial gazette, and I think about half a dozen of those have been already amended and made into law, including I think the capital gains exemption on that, and making it a zero tax vehicle, for example. I think the stamp duty issue, which I think people touched on earlier, is still in the process of being looked at, and we hope there'll be a positive outcome. I'm also speaking to many people who are interested in REITs, and I think due to certain things that are pending, there's a sense of a wait and see attitude there, which I'm sure it'll be like breaking the ice once you make that initial crack. I think there'll be an amazing effect with lots of people coming on, a lot of players in the field. Regarding your the second part of your question, what can the government do? I think it's also the case of what can the private sector do. So if you look at the impact of COVID on REITs in the Asia Pacific region, as you can imagine, commercial and retail real estate has been impacted the hardest. Even in Sri Lanka, according to our own data, mall lease rates have dropped drastically. Occupancy has been maintained, but at the expense of developers offering a very, very huge reductions, sometimes grace periods during lockdowns where people haven't been paying rent. So on the flip side, countries like Singapore and Malaysia have found that local malls have been doing well because of the lockdown dynamic. So it's not like you can paint the entire retail segment of real estate with one brush. Similarly, commercial real estate is getting used to the idea of adjusting to work from home. So what's already happened in Asia is that things like business parks, places where people can work with more flexibility, reduced commute time. So you have suburban business parks, like in the developed world. That's something which commercial real estate is coming back with, and we would expect that to also continue to keep REITs profitable in the region. Just to put things in check, I believe that in the last 10 years in the Asia Pacific region, REITs have delivered something like a 6.8 return as compared to equities, which is about 5.4. So REITs have been a very attractive investment proposition. And with the kind of flexibility that we're seeing now in the real estate markets for like office spaces, retail, there will be ongoing opportunities in the region. And before I finish, Rifka, I'll just add that there is a lot of evidence to show that during the pandemic, industrial real estate, warehousing, etc., has been doing extremely well. and has been growing even during the pandemic. So there are certain bright spots that will drive the REITs market in the region, and hopefully Sri Lanka as well.
What are your thoughts? What should we do short term and in the long term to create this robust ecosystem or to sustain a robust ecosystem?
Right. Thank you, Rifka. As an economist, the stock market is more like the icing on the cake. So I'm going to go back to the cake because, again, it's all very connected. So essentially, there is an opportunity that's coming from, I think the word used here is crisis. It might be a little bit strong, but certainly we do need to change, as Ramesh said. I think there'll be a case of being forced to change. I don't think Sri Lanka's had a balance of payments surplus for more than 2 or 3 years since independence. So we have been kind of living a lifestyle which may not be sustainable. So we need to, some form of a devaluation is inevitable. It's happening, whether it's going to be purely through market forces or some kind of intervention. So what are we looking at? We're going to have an environment where our exporters will be more competitive. So we need to be driving the country towards an export-oriented economy to generate something of a sustainable balance sheet. We need to be more efficient. Our state-owned enterprises are just terrible in terms of their efficiency, service quality, professionalism. I think Kanishka used that word. I don't want to say that everyone, paint everyone the same brush, but certainly there's such a lot of room for improvement. And that people like the IMF, if they do get engaged with the government, is some of the things that they will impose will be efficiency, productivity improvements in these areas. Another one that I've heard many commentators mention is that, and I find it quite strange, that Sri Lanka has quite an odd taxation system. It's an under-taxed economy. You can see that over the years since I was a kid and being driven around by my uncles, many of the roads here are still the same size, but the vehicle count has grown exponentially by 50 times or 100 times. It kind of indicates that the government has remained poor while private wealth has flourished, and it's not really, again, a sustainable situation. We need to have a better taxation system, a fairer society, but we would not want to pay more tax unless we knew that we could get more accountability, more efficiency, better services, less leakages. Sri Lanka is a rich country. I think the World Bank said this of the island economy some years ago, that the sum of the parts don't add up to the total. There's so much leakage. There are illicit markets everywhere. We've been doing studies in agriculture and various sectors, and there's huge tax losses due to illicit products getting in, etc. So these are things that I think need to be addressed, fixed, and have a tighter, better ship, more streamlined, and then the future will be bright. I will add something to what was said before, that about the youth. I think they're going to play a really important role, especially with a 200 trillion cryptocurrency market. And in my case, it is 17, 18, and 22-year-olds who are schooling me on what it is and trying to demystify me and my lack of knowledge in that. But even if personally we might not like something or the way that it's going, we will have to accept it, embrace it, just like we did with emails, as was mentioned before. But thank you, Rifka. I think it's going to be exciting.
For all the latest market insights, please refer to our annual report 2021. Be market intelligent with RIU.